Welcome. I'm Shravan Goli, Chief Product Officer here at Coursera. We're back today with another installment of this ongoing series where I'm joined by leaders across business, education, and government to explore topics at the intersection of learning, technology, and innovation. Now, today I'm joined by Scott David Meyer. Scott is a professional marketer, educator, entrepreneur, and champion of web3 technologies and platforms for education. He currently leads Ed3, an agency and studio helping clients scale education and building products and use cases for Web3 in learning. Now, he blogs frequently, and I would really encourage you to check it out at digest.ed3, that's ed3.gg. Now, Scott, thank you for joining us today. I'd like to start by asking, what was your journey to becoming an advocate for Web3 in education?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. And it's always such a circuitous journey where, I started as an entrepreneur, I moved to higher ed, and I was running an accelerated learning program, started an entrepreneurship center at the university. And at the same time, I was exploring Web3 and specifically a tool called rabbithole.gg, which is where you can learn Web3 by doing it. And I heard a podcast with the founder who said that 16,000 people use Rabbit Hole to sign up for something called an ENS domain, which is basically a web domain. And they were then provided an airdrop, which is essentially where they kind of get money to seed the initial community. And these initial users, half of them were from the global South. And in total, $200 million of value was created from these people just learning. And my mind started to explode to think about all the challenges we have at scaling education. What if we could better scale it and incentivize people to not only learn as an 18-year-old, but to continue to learn their entire life? So that got me really excited for what Web3 could do in education and learning.
That's fantastic. I mean, we definitely have to break the model of linear education and turn it into a lifelong education model. So I think it makes a lot of sense. So to the audience, today we're exploring how Web3 will and already is impacting education. You just heard something from Scott. So let's have some baselines. Fans of cryptocurrency and Web3 champion the idea of decentralization, right? Freeing commerce and other activities from government oversight and regulation. In other words, less extracted by institutions and more community owned. Now, Scott, so in layperson terms, what is Web3?
Yeah. So let's talk about Web3 and then we'll talk about kind of its implementation and education. So to me, Web3 is two things. It's an era and it's also a suite of tools. So the era of Web3 is this idea of I can read on the internet, I can share information on the internet, and I can own information on the internet. So the idea of digital scarcity. Yeah. You think about the early days of the internet, I would go read a web page, and then in the maybe Web 2 days, I would share on Facebook, but that information had to be given to a company who then shared it. Now I can just share it myself and actually create contracts where I maybe get paid if I'm an artist, or I can keep track of who owns a house or who got a certificate at a university. So it's kind of this new era. And a lot of the use cases we're seeing, people are maybe familiar with, like NFTs, which stands for non-fungible token. I always say this is essentially what I do with my kids to help them behave. If they have a good day, I give them a little shiny jewel, that's like the token for behaving. An NFT is just a token, just a representation. But the difference is each one is unique, right? So unlike my jewels that are all bought at the dollar store, each one of these NFTs are unique and I can trade them, send them, show them off, things like that.
Maybe or like the baseball cards, right?
Yeah, baseball cards, Pokemon cards. Yeah, these are not new ideas, right? Another common use case is what's called DeFi, so decentralized finance. Essentially, if I can trust you, I don't need a bank in the middle to be that trusted holder of the money. And then DAOs is another really common one. A DAO stands for decentralized autonomous organization, which is basically a new way to work. It's kind of like a digital co-op where the people who do the work can actually own the work as well. So those are some of the common kind of use cases, but essentially it's this new idea of collaboration, right? And and I think that makes big impacts in education. Yeah, go ahead.
I think these are very powerful concepts, which is, I think that they're talking about decentralization and autonomy and ownership. And I think organization model, which is like, humans always have come together into organized communities, right? Whether it is owned by a corporation or whether this decentralized DAO world where the community owns the organization itself, right? And so that's a very interesting revolutionary concept, I think. So what are some of the examples of these in education today? In other words, like, you were talking about Ed3, right? So you want to talk, give our audience a few examples of this.
Sure, yeah. I think education is following a similar path where the initial model was I go to a place and I learn a thing from someone.
Yes.
Then the kind of Ed2 is like Coursera, where now we take away time and place. I can learn wherever I want. Anyone can be a teacher. I think what Ed3 adds onto that is I can take experiences from multiple places and put them together. So I can get my class from Coursera. I can also be an Eagle Scout. I can also have an internship, and those can be recognized as one path. Whereas it's a lot harder to have sort of non-traditional experiences or, experiences outside the classroom be accepted. So that's kind of what Ed3 can really do, is combine our experiences. And we're seeing this happen in a lot of different ways in terms of companies and individual use cases. So a fun one I did recently was actually with a 5th grade class in Bangalore. And it was a group of 12 students whose parents gave permission for them to learn how to use cryptocurrency. And the idea was, let's open a wallet for them. Let's give them a ENS domain. So basically like scottdavidmeyer.eth, they all got their own names. And then they learned how to design an NFT. So someone could hire them from anywhere in the world, pay them, and they now have this understanding of a skill that will probably be important maybe by the time they're in high school, right? In 10 to 15 years. So starting young. So you can see people learning about it. But then we also see interesting use cases. The Learning Economy is a great nonprofit organization. And they're working with like folks like the World Bank and people like that to explore how do we help, for example, refugee communities port their education experiences. So, if I'm in the Ukraine, all of a sudden I can't call up the registrar to get my degree. So how do we give people ownership of what they've learned so then I can go to an employer and show them that I'm skilled, and whether that's online or offline. So a lot of interesting examples, and we can go deeper, but I think those are a few fun ones I like.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think there are tons of these that are happening around the world, and so that's exciting. Now let's kind of dig deeper into this. Clearly, there's a lot of skepticism first, because to me, I think skepticism comes from the fact that you don't completely understand what exactly is Web3, what is the application of Web3 in education, etc. And that's how it always starts. Technology first invites a lot of skeptics and then a lot of believers over time. And these things take time. So if you dig deeper, so one of the key questions here, if I'm in the education industry, like why decentralize education, right? What challenges can Web3 platforms and technologies actually solve for me?
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of times people put Web3 vis-a-vis traditional education, which is probably going to have an impact, but really the opportunity in my mind is there's a lot of people who aren't being educated, right? So the majority of Americans don't have a college degree. Only 7% of people in the world have higher education degree. We know from UNESCO something like 600 million K-12 students aren't being educated well in their schools. And so there's a lot of people who need alternative models. And for people who learn in different ways, maybe want to get alternative experiences, this is a great way to do it. So I think the three things that come to mind for what Web3 really brings to education is accessibility. So those people, regardless of where they live, can access and credential their experiences and their learning. Second would be affordability. So the fact that we can have new models where maybe you get paid while you learn, you don't have a lot of overhead, obviously, of physical infrastructure. That's going to lead to a lot of changes, and decentralized finance could be a part of that. And then the third one is accreditation. So how do we unlock alternative experiences and show that they're valid? And for employers, this is really exciting because right now you're maybe limited by people who can speak your language, maybe are in your time zone, maybe have gone to a school you recognize. But when I'm able to trust that you have the skills I need, that gets really exciting. And so Web3 allows us to have that trust without having someone in the middle with a stamp saying, I approve that this is a good enough level. We can actually have trustless coordination. So I think those three words are really the solutions it brings. And then we can think of a lot of ways, like we talked about refugees, people outside of traditional systems, people who have experience and want that recognized. Like those are all really fun use cases, I think.
Yeah, no, these are great examples. And I like the idea of accessibility, affordability, and accreditation. If I think about you know, accessibility, you talk about this idea of the airdropped university.
Yeah.
I think it touches both accessibility and affordability in some ways. I would love for you to elaborate on that idea. I think it's this because I think what people need to kind of visualize is how does this really play out in a potential example?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. The airdropped university, I wrote about that on ed3.gg, and there's the thing that's possible with tokens, and that could be an NFT or maybe more likely a verifiable credential, which is similar to an NFT, but you don't have to share it, so you have some more privacy. It really unlocks personalized learning. So a lot of time I explain Ed3 as tech-enabled personalized learning, but with the token, I come to the university and all of a sudden I have access to classes that match my skill.
Yeah.
So maybe I've already spoken Spanish in the home, and now I can just access that Spanish literature course instead of having to take prereqs, right? But it's not just in the classroom, it could also be in real life experiences. So when I come to campus, maybe I get access to a different dorm because I have shown leadership, or maybe I get into a certain club on campus, right? Because of something I've done. So the airdrop university is really this idea that instead of just paying for tuition, we actually bring our experiences and it unlocks personal experiences. And at the end, we have a credential, but we also maybe have a token that allows other people access. So that could be for alumni events down the road, or maybe I keep it and I give it to my child, and they have access because of an experience. So I think what it could do is align incentives where, the alumni, the school, the student, they all want the school to get better, because the stronger the school is, the more valuable my token and these unique experiences are. And we can really have a positive flywheel of education institutions growing together.
That's interesting. One of the concepts that comes up is also sort of you talk about the personalized learning, but mix and match, like really create your own degree in essence, right? Or create your own skill pathway here to a particular interest in area, etc. So there's a question around, to me, I think, with this airdropped university, obviously that gives the ability for an individual to earn. How does an individual, there's a lot of this blockchain for credentials, blockchain for that, but what may be a simplistic way for the individual to kind of have some sort of a wallet and some sort of something that can continue to carry and be able to showcase their learnings?
Yeah. So what is the potential for, or what?
An example, you talk about Disco, which is an educational wallet.
Exactly.
I like that idea of kind of bringing it all together, but still the concept of decentralization and ownership still needs to be in the hands of the individual who's willing to share, here's my history of learning, educational experience, or projects, or internship experience, etc.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think it, so you mentioned disco.xyz is a company working on this, and others where I think a lot of people think about NFTs as a credential, and that's one route people are exploring, but there's some issues there with privacy, right? Like maybe I failed my class and I don't want that on the blockchain forever. And so I think, there's a lot of use cases that shouldn't use the blockchain, right? So I think it's more that I have a wallet and then I get to choose, just like when I send a resume out to get a job at Coursera, I'm going to change my experiences based on what matches that job. And so we can really think about verifiable credentials as gathering experiences, giving the user the control to show and validate the ones that need to get validated, and then push those to the blockchain where then they can be verified. And so that's where if you take a non-traditional experience, whether it's Eagle Scouts or whatever, people might not know if they should trust that individual. So I saw a question, why not trust a credential issuer? We should, right? That works. Higher ed is fairly well trusted, but it's estimated around 20% of universities might close. What happens if my school no longer exists, right? How can I trust that? What if I grew up in a place without education? What if I, worked at Jim's Electric and they're not trusted by anyone outside of my town, right? So we have to be able to combine those trusted issuers along with others that maybe need more validation. And so I think there's a concept of trust registries kind of built into this, where if the National Boy Scouts trust the North Dakota Boy Scouts, and North Dakota Boy Scouts trust Fargo Boy Scouts, I can get a credential from Fargo Boy Scouts and have it trusted all the way up, whereas the local employer would need more validation, right? So, but all that gives the individual the control is the idea. And I don't have to do 20% of my classes at the person who gives me the stamp, right? Like I can just go get the best things from the best teachers. Yeah.
And that's right. And I wonder if there is a DAO concept, the DAO concept here that could actually make it, because all of the ecosystem participants are part of the decentralized autonomous organization. It's self-regulated in a lot of ways, but you start recognizing the the mechanic shop to the educational institution you went to that are part of this DAO or system. Then I think it could make it interesting for the credentials to be posted in there and accessed through the wallet from the individual potentially.
Yeah. And I think there's kind of two things. There's a concept I really like called the sheepskin effect, which is essentially, if I do 7/8 of a college degree, I missed the last semester, I don't get paid 7/8 of a college grad when I finish, right? Which shows that, I'm getting paid for the paper, not for the learning along the way. And so how do we enable people to earn more as they learn more, right? So as my skills improve, so does my salary, right? And DAOs could be one way, because DAOs really enable you to focus or find information from the best people in a really niche area. A really great example for people to check out is a DAO called CCS, which stands for Crypto Culture and Society. They bill themselves as liberal arts for crypto. So they're essentially looking at what are the societal implications of decentralization. And they come together for a semester and they have eight classes. And if I'm an employer, that'd be useful to know. If somebody went to that, even though that doesn't mean they're going to be qualified to be an electrician, they might be qualified to think strategy and crypto, right? Even though that's not a degree. So I think DAOs can really fill gaps where there's emerging technology that hasn't made its way into traditional schools. Yeah,
I love the learning DAO from the Crypto Culture and Society as well. There are interesting questions coming up here. Alessandra asks, can't you combine higher ed plus micro-credentialing?
Yeah, I think you definitely can. I think all of this is and I think that really Web3 allows you to do atomized learning. A micro credential takes administrative work, so you aren't going to get as small as you could with Web3. So with Web3, you could credential every 10 minutes someone stays in class if you really wanted to, right? It's not, there's nobody working to make that stamp. It's all automated. And so there's kind of this spectrum of micro credential is maybe you've done a year, you've done 6 months, but how can you show someone went to that weekend seminar? How do you show somebody did a community project? So kind of fills in some of those gaps, but I think that's definitely an and they work together.
I agree, Scott. I mean, it's an and. I was reading somewhere an example where if you're actually in a robotics class, there's the today all somebody sees is the grade you got in the robotics class. What if actually you can see, the grade may not be the best. You may have gotten a B, the grade, but what if somebody can actually see the robot you made and what the robot actually did? Maybe they built a ESG environment related or climate control related, whatever it is. But it aligns with the passion, but they can actually show the project and deliver the project. And that can be in their wallet to be checked out by a potential employer and not just really focused on the grade. I think that's the and part here, which is you have your traditional credentials, absolutely. And you don't really need a blockchain necessarily to verify the traditional credentials if it is the case. But really what we're saying is, ultimately, the individual is in control of their credentials sharing and experience sharing, and they can aggregate the traditional ones with all of the non-traditional experience that they can get, even while going through the traditional education, but also through the internships and other experiences that they get in real life.
Yeah, exactly. And you can build those paths, right? So if people put their credential on the blockchain, I could go look at people who got hired at Coursera, what other things did they do, did they create a robot or did they write a paper? And I could start to follow the paths that are going to get me where I want to go, instead of having to take a preordained kind of major or something like that.
That's right. And one of the next questions I had, like, as John's asking here, like some of the key hesitations you hear from educators around Web3. So the question is like, can we address the potential for abuse or misuse of any Web3 system when it comes to sort of this learning and, some of the challenges?
Yeah, I think, is there abuse in the current system? For sure, right? Great inflation and people lying about credentials, but the answer is there's going to be risks that we need to worry about. The biggest change, I think, with Web3 is that you are in control, right? So you have to keep care of your information just like you would with your social security number or others. You're not going to be able to call up a school if you lose, you give someone your seed phrase and they shut down your wallet, so there are concerns there. But there's a lot of security built into the system. So there's definitely a learning that has to come. And the solution with Web3 is transparency, right? Where when we can all see everything, there's going to be a lot less misuse than in maybe the current system where things are a little more opaque. I think the biggest challenge I know that we talked about previously is access, right? In terms of, do I have the technology to take advantage of this? I think that, communities that are historically disconnected, don't have internet access, maybe don't have access to education, they have the most to gain from this, but they do need that minimum level of, I'm on the internet, right? Like they need some level of access. And so I worry that the creators right now are going to be more wealthy because they have access and are learning. We need a system designed by everyone. And so fortunately, Web3 can be composed or built upon, remixed. So there's a lot of potential where you're not locked into one tool like a Facebook or a Google, but we need people to know how to get engaged. So that's, I think, a concern as well.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's fantastic. I think another question popped up here. Don't know if you have a good answer for this, but from Robert, curious if there are any use cases involving XAPI, TinCan, and nano credentials via Web3. This seems like an interesting project via existing LMS systems.
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with TinCan, but in terms of nano credentials, those again work really well. The problem right now is there's not a good place to put them all. The digital wallets we have are not really built to handle multiple uses. So like having your crypto next to your personal identification is not really built in. So that's coming down the road. And I would watch the learning economy has some really interesting projects coming out there that'll make it a little bit more useful in the world of atoms, not just bits. And I think that's kind of the big bridge we need to build in the next 6 months, 12 months is how do we take this really fun stuff that we can do digitally and apply it to real world physical use cases. So I not only get a unique experience on this website, but I get a unique experience in my school, or I not only have access to cryptocurrency, but I now have access to a debit card that can swipe and I can use it. So I think there's, again, and is going to be the theme of this, webinar.
No, that's fantastic. Now, you talked about a little bit in the 6 month to 12 month range as we kind of getting closer to the end of the session here. What do you anticipate Web3 and education will look like in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years?
Yeah. So I hope that education looks more like a VIP car service than the DMV. I think about
care to explain that, Scott?
Yeah, that's a crazy analogy. So, if you rent a limo, they're going to come pick you up, take you exactly where you need to go. You're going to have a personal experience, right? When you go to the DMV, you pick up the number, you wait in line, everyone gets the same customer experience. You're all getting the same thing. Our education system was built for industrial education. It worked great, but what we need now is a unique experience for every single individual. So when you log into Facebook or Amazon or Netflix, it's different for you than it is for me. Based on your taste, experiences, what you've watched, what you've bought. And that's exactly what education should be like, where I'm starting to get interested in CRISPR, and now I'm going to be able to find that course online from the best CRISPR expert. And that might lead me into green tech. And now there's a list of jobs in green tech that I can explore. And so it's just going to get more personal and more unique is the goal.
That's a great point. I mean, I actually think this is sort of the vision to kind of personalize education and create your own pathways is something I think, a lot of us believe in, a lot of us want to get there. But there's a lack of a systematic way of doing it, and maybe Web3 technologies can actually enable us to kind of start getting in that direction. Because I think a lot of the problem obviously is like, okay, you can get educated, you can get education from a lot of different places, you can get experiences. Ultimately, employers got to be able to showcase that to the employers, and the employers have to believe in kind of the experiences that you're developing as well. But if you're actually connecting the dots, and then if you can bring the employers into the ecosystem here, that would be great. Do you foresee that coming along, like the employers coming along and to participate in accessing and kind of believing and trusting the experience that is coming through?
Yeah, and it's already happening. It's going to be slower in the world of atoms than in bits, but you already see it in the computer science world. I share my GitHub. I don't share my piece of paper that says I have a CS degree. And what we're seeing now is organizations that already work in Web3, like decentralized organizations, they're hiring based on-chain experience, which basically means I've done something that's provable, so they know that I could hire them. So like Rabbit Hole as another, bringing it back to that example, when I do something that's tracked and anyone can see that I've traded a cryptocurrency or I've bought an ENS domain. So it's going to start with the folks that are already bought into Web3, and they're going to hire based on experience and on-chain credentials, and it'll slowly make its way into more traditional. And I think the optimistic side of me sees this actually having a quicker and bigger impact in areas that don't have a robust financial system or hiring system. So, it's sometimes called the leapfrog effect, right? Where if I have wired sound system in my house, I'm not going to buy a Sonos because I already have a good sound system. But if I haven't spent the time and money to wire my house, I'm going straight to Sonos, right? Straight to the future.
That's
so
true.
I think people who have been left behind or maybe don't have access, or people who have families, can't go to school during normal hours, like they're going to jump to the front. It'll take a while for that electrician probably to validate it, but I think you'll see it gradually growing more and more as the tooling's built out.
That makes a lot of sense. Last big question. So how can educators and others in higher ed or ed tech start preparing today for those changes down the road?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I hope that everyone here wants to learn more. I think that if you are an educator, it's a great time to be an expert. There's a lot of people who want to learn what you're teaching, and they might not enroll in your school or know who you are. And so really decentralized organizations and Web3 present an opportunity for you to sell your knowledge, to teach more people, to have a bigger impact. So I think to get started, 2 sites I drive people to: check out Ed3 DAO, which is at ed3educators.com. So this is a DAO by and for educators. So it's all teachers who are kind of teaching each other about Web3 and creating content for other teachers. That's a really safe space if you're a teacher and want to dip your toe.
I love the site.
And then I would check out, there's a great tool called Web3 Starter Pack .xyz. And this is actually created by a DAO, which is kind of fun. So you can see a DAO came together with different knowledge sets and put together essentially the 101 to Web3. So that's all free to use at Web3 Starter Pack .xyz, and created by CCS, which we talked about. So that's a great one to learn more. And then reach out. We're on LinkedIn, so you can probably see my LinkedIn profile. I'm always happy to answer questions and help people learn, because it's going to take talent. It's going to take diversity of ideas. And this is, this maybe is the internet 1995, right? Like we have grand visions, and we want to make sure we uphold the standards that we think is possible to build a better internet.
That's right. On the same note, is there any project or two you want to quickly share for 15 seconds?
Sure. Well, I write frequently at digest.ed3.gg. So digest.ed3.gg. So I would just drive people there. Would love to have you read and give comments, because I'm trying to think about things like the Airdrop University, what's coming, and how do we work through it together.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. This has been amazing. I learned a lot just listening to you, but there are some great resources you listed out today, and I would definitely encourage people to kind of get started on that. Skepticism is natural when technologies are at early stages. And, my view is, I think you need to get involved, get in there. If you're an educator, you want to be comfortable with this idea, because the idea is going to continue to develop. But my view is you should contribute to the idea development. So if it is, then if you're interested in that, go get started on some of these resources, and let's see how this kind of plays out in the next 5 to 10 years. So to our audience, Thank you to those of us who joined us either live or later. So this is the 5th episode of an ongoing series where I'm joined by leaders across business, education, and government to explore topics at the intersection of learning, technology, and innovation. Next month, in June, I'll explore how XR and immersive learning are transforming learning. So I'll be joined by guest Lauren Atkins Booty, Director of Open Learning Initiatives at the University of Michigan, and Jeremy Nelson, Director of the Extended Reality Initiative, also at the University of Michigan. Until then, I'm your host, Shravan Goli. Stay safe and see you next time.